So we've already seen people joining in.
Yeah.
As far as I can see, we have a lot of attendees, which is a really positive thing. Let's start by making the initial introduction. I think we can, start telling more about our community and Product 360. So let me share the screen. So I think we should start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third Product 360 series event powered by Orpheum. This is an event series that aims at bringing together all the knowledge from product, user experience teams, design teams, data and engineering under the same roof and share experiences and best practices from global product leaders. We are very fortunate today to have a really important product leader, according to my point of view at least, which is Vasilis Dimos, co-founder of Skroutz, which is the biggest marketplace in Greece. And he will be sharing with us a brief overview and lesson learned over the 15 years evolution of Skroutz. So I think we should mention some things before we start about Product 360. So all of you can join the product community of Product 360. You can either join through LinkedIn, which is, I would say, the most active social media channel. But also we have our meetup page, and we plan in the future to also have bigger conferences, not just 1 hour webinars. In order to bring all those global leaders together and also support the local ecosystem. Before starting, I think we should thank our sponsors and our supporters. So obviously Orpheum is our main sponsor, and our supporters, especially Product Community Greece, which have been with us since the beginning and the launch of Product 360. During our session, we would really like, and we encourage you to do so, use our Q&A tool through Zoom, obviously, where you can send all your questions, and we will address them during the discussion. So it's be a quite interactive session with Vasilis. And I think we should present Vasilis. What I would suggest is giving the presentation to Vasilis, and then he can start by making a brief intro about himself, tell us more about his role in Skroutz, and obviously what he's currently working on, as he is also the founder of Structured Ventures, a really interesting venture studio. So I think, Vasilis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sakis. Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for taking the time in this late afternoon to join a webinar. I think everyone is, not necessarily happy to have another Zoom meeting, but that's how life is right now. So I'm sharing my screen. Is it like working? Do we see the presentation?
Yeah, wisdom.
Okay. Okay. So as Sakis mentioned, a quick intro, a bit about the format. Sakis did approach me in terms of, sharing some learnings over the years, and I'm kind of over the years have become a bit allergic to monologues and to pure presentations. So as Sakis mentioned, please, this is more of a dialogue, and please feel free to ask anything at any time. You can just type it in. I'll try to cover it as quickly as possible. And as you'll see, this isn't like a very extensive presentation. We are not trying to wow anyone with the designs, but we will, Sakis shared some notes about what we think should be covered, and we'll try to cover each point separately and talk a bit about it, hopefully spark some conversation on the individual topics, and maybe, we can all together like dive into more specific, the wisdom of hindsight, as I called it, because I don't want to pretend, that especially for product development, and we knew lots of stuff about it before we started, and maybe, okay, just quick intro about myself, where it all started. So, I was born and raised in Germany, and after studying electrical and computer engineering here at the National Technical University, actually I think the first job was Skroutz. I joined the two Georges in 2004, and we started the company. And inside of the company, there was like a transition of roles. We started as the duo of engineering power, me and George. George is now the CEO of Skroutz. And then I transitioned a bit when we kind of, grew more complex into the CTO role, and when we needed specialization into the head of product role, because there are people, we have people now and back then who did the technical part much better than I did. And in 2016, I transitioned into the head of marketplace, which was like a bit of a startup within a startup environment, where we did spearhead the marketplace development, which is the smart card initiative, and which now is like the building stone of the modern Skroutz, what Skroutz is right now, and hopefully for the next years. I did stop the active participation in Skroutz in 2020 after I got the opportunity and started Structured Ventures. So just to describe like these two projects in my life, Skroutz, obviously, nowadays I can say that most of Greek people knew of Skroutz. At some point they maybe stumbled upon it over Google's search results. We moved from 3 to 500 plus people right now, and then there is Skroutz Last Mile and everything, and EveryPay, so almost 1,000 people now. Huge offices like most of the startups nowadays, and obviously massive traffic. The second project, which is like kind of, when I did the marketplace initiative, kind of was my personal choice, was Structured Ventures. It's a venture studio. It lets me do what I like to do, which is product development at the early stages, even before product solution fit, like the whole ecosystem, the energy of the young founders, young and old founders, obviously. We kind of also specialize a bit on marketplace dynamics, just because we have the background in this. So as I said, there are two main parts in my journey so far. The one is product development inside of Skroutz. The second is product development at Structured Ventures. And I think there's a distinction between two ways of product development there. In Skroutz, Orpheum members or people who work in bigger companies, you don't necessarily have the product solution fit. Like, you are in a vetted environment, these are my customers that pay for this. So usually product development is done, as an add-on to the core product, as a satellite product, everything else in a very specific market niche where you're operating. So this is one kind, as add-on product development. And then there is like what we're doing at Structured Ventures, which is the more startup-like approach, where you just, think about a product and a problem, sorry, and how you can solve it. And obviously, like, this is the whole stack, like product solution fit, product market fit, MVP, scale, growth, everything involved into this. So these are some distinctions, and this is my background in product development.
Vasilis,
and one disclaimer, yes, please.
if you had to choose, which one would it be?
Obviously, for me, it's the second one.
Which do you enjoy the most?
Yes. Even at Skroutz, after 2016, when we did the last development of the Skroutz interface, which is still online, which is the helmet version, at some point I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I have nothing more to add to the price comparison component of Skroutz. Like, it's a point where you just can't think of a meaningful addition. And then I looked at the marketplace, which I thought was like the next step in the journey of Skroutz. And we built it up as a startup within a startup. Like, I'm a bit contrarian to specific structures and OKRs and everything else. Yes, I think they are a necessity at a certain point of the company, but I'm not like the best wheel or like the part of the machinery if it works like this. And that's why I also, started Structured Venture, because it lets me operate in a space where I'm like more chaotic, more fast moving, and less restrictive. There is a question here: how do you get the idea, inspiration for Skroutz Marketplace? What's the goal behind it? And yes, we can, just add on to this. The marketplace, the marketplace was, as I said, in 2016. At some point, the whole world was moving. There was like this craze of internet buying and people going online. And then there was like in 2016, we reached a point where we said, okay, we can only do marginal improvements from here on. Like, it's like, you reached, obviously there are like stuff you can do, but if you want to overcome this local optimum in terms of customer experience, because people left from Skroutz, they had like a good price comparison engine experience, and then they came to a shop and they had like bad delivery, bad service, bad RMA, stock availabilities which were crappy and everything else. So, in order to tackle these products, we thought, okay, we need to do it ourselves. Like, we waited 10, 12 years for the market to fix itself, and in 2016 it was tragic. It's not much better right now, to be honest. It's a bit better, but back then, the challenge for us was, why can't we, at least in Athens, have an Amazon-like experience like they do have, for example, in London? Or why can't we? Okay, and what would we need to do in order to have this experience? And if you start thinking like this, then, and after having like a stagnation period of like 1-2 years where you think, okay, I'm only doing marginal improvements, then you jump onto it because it's like the huge opportunity. Okay, we should do like last mile delivery, we should do checkout, we could do this better, and everything else. So it was like, the logical step for us, And also to add to this, you look outside of Greece, you look at price comparison engines, and you see stagnation once again in the growth profile. Like in Germany, there were price comparison engines before of Skroutz, for example, and then they reached a certain point, and then came the marketplace solution from Amazon or somebody else, Zalando or whatever. And they couldn't like offer the end user the overall experience they needed. So we looked at this and said, we can't let this happen to us. We need to stay ahead of the curve and build it. I hope this answers the questions. So just to go back to the slides here, a small disclaimer: product development. For me, product development was and I'm afraid to be once again anti-conformist or contrarian to the general notion of what books describe as product development. It's a bit hunch-based in a chaotic environment. This means, just take, for example, you're building a social app for gatherings 1 year ago, and you do everything right, and then comes COVID along. It's a chaotic environment. You can't really say it might be super product development, but if you have an environment where everything can change massively, there isn't a rule book which you can follow. I think there are some core values. I think there are some basic guidelines and principles you need to follow, but you need to adjust obviously to the situation in each company. And one last disclaimer, obviously survivorship bias, okay? Nobody's doing webinars with people who failed at 20 startups because there is a risk that they fail because they are not good at it. But, obviously we are talking about Skroutz because Skroutz was a big success, at least on a Greek level. And obviously, I can only describe in hindsight, obviously, experiences we had with a positive outcome. But contrarian once again to this is a table of products we built at Skroutz. And, it's like the first column is the product, second column is the initial assumptions, and the third column is what actually happened. So, there's always intentions and there are always strategic implications when you do product development. At Skroutz, as I said, we were in a vetted environment. We knew how price comparison engines work, how the e-commerce system worked. So we thought at some point, as I said, roughly, this is the period where Skroutz has reached a certain growth level and we look into new ventures before the marketplace. And we thought, okay, geographical expansions, why not new markets? Like, the obvious thing, if you want to do product development, this is add on to the revenue, add on to the bottom line, hopefully. But revenue additions with new markets is always like the easy first pick. What happened with Alve and Skroutz is we buried 2 million euros. Lots of lessons learned in terms of how you go into a market. Lots of arrogance shedded, because we thought we can just copy paste a solution which worked in Greece and bring it to another market. And initially we deployed in Turkey, and then we said, okay, they are not very e-commerce advanced, and that's the problem. Then we went to the UK, and they were obviously much more e-commerce advanced than us, and it failed there too. So, the gist was like, it's not that easy. It's not like you copy paste your product into a different location, geography, and it works. And this also reiterating on the chaotic environment, underlines this. This was the exact same code base. We did exactly the same thing, which, for example, in terms of organic growth here in Greece was huge. And then we went to different markets and it just didn't work. It just didn't work as we thought it did. Sobi was like a kind of a product back then when coupons were very broadly used. And we did once again, the reasoning behind it was good intentions. We thought new product line, easy money. Okay, we do aggregations, we can do this easily. But obviously, when you have a company like Skroutz, which grew I think in the early years, it was 300% per year. And then you have a capped industry with Sobi, which everybody knew this can't work forever. Then obviously strategic, once again, the wrong decision, intentions versus strategy. You see the point. The same with auctions and classifieds. There was a new revenue stream, strategic, wrong audience. People buy on Skroutz new mobile phones or whatever they buy on Skroutz, and they don't want to look in parallel into used products. And then we have the other side, like the last two projects were projects where the initial thought was, okay, for Skroutz.gr is a small platform like a Facebook tracker pixel kind of, where we can see if someone converts on the store, obviously anonymous and everything else. But we can see that the lead from our side is converting into a sale on the shop side. And obviously there was no real reason to do this. Like, it was massive in terms of engineering power needed, because we were like having 3,000 shops, and actually you were like exposed to the traffic of all those shops combined, and no easy way to monetize this. Nobody would pay for this. Obviously we knew like people will be allergic to this. And what came out of this was a great product team, because against all these hurdles, they made it work. And now it's like a key driver in our worldview, because we can complete like the overview of the cycle we are creating, of the lead generation cycle. Sorry, I'll come to the question immediately, just to finish this like slide. The third, the marketplace. We talked about the marketplace initiative. The smart card started in 2016. We were having like, lead generation in general is very operations light. You're only just redirecting someone to somebody else and you get a commission. So the core value proposition of Skroutz, the core business model of Skroutz, was very high margin, low operation. So when you think about marketplace, you say, why would you bother? Like, why would you bother doing last mile? Why would you bother, accepting lower margins? And once again, what it turned out to be was another great product team. Like, each internal product success led to a very good engineering team and product team down the road. And obviously for the marketplace, it's the growth driver. It's as a price comparison engine in 2021, you can't do lots of things. As a marketplace, you are like the thing to be in 2021. So I'm just reading out the question which came up parallel. How possible is bottom-up product innovation in a company of the size of Skroutz? Talking about new products, would it be possible to pitch it through a PR, FAQ, or 6-pager? Is it top-down mainly? That's a very good question, and we kind of were like two sides of a coin inside of Skroutz. Me and my co-founder George Hadjigeorgiou, the CEO I mentioned earlier. George was always like more democratic than I am. Like, he was trying to foster innovation on the top, on the bottom level, and have it flow throughout the company up, and like have everybody like have a pitch at a specific feature or something they needed, they thought was very important for the company. I, on the other side, think that while it is very, very important to have a good connection to all levels of the company, it's just very hard internally to scale it bottom up. Like, it's the only way I can think about it is the way we kind of created it with the marketplace. Like, if you have like bottom up drivers inside of the company of innovation, then you need to separate them out, create a separate P&L, make them aware of the money they are spending, make them aware of what the target is, very specific, like saying, okay, we need you to do 100 signups, and this is the burn rate you have right now. Actually treat them like you would treat as an investor, a startup, and then let them handle everything on themselves. This is the way it worked for us. It's a bit more of a laconic approach in terms of having someone, struggle with everything. But what I found is, if you don't do this, then there are lots of places where people can make excuses, like, okay, I was asking the product team to do this for me, and they have me like on the waiting line for the last 6 months, and this is blocking my product and everything else. And I'm doing this for the last 6 months, which is obviously over engineering, but since I don't have to bear the costs, this is okay for me. you need to be like kind of the bad investor internally in order to make the startup in a startup work. And the startup in a startup work is for me the only way you can foster innovation bottom up inside of a company. Okay. Okay.
Another interesting question.
Yes. What about Skroutz food and any post-mortem tips? Okay. So first, Skroutz food was an it was an application we built internally in order to try to cover some ground on the food delivery market. And we started it at some point. There were lots of internal discussions regarding Skroutz food. The gist of it was, I think, inside, once again, if you can't do like a product 10 times better than someone else, and this someone else has covered like the brand approach and has done the land grab and has like everything on it on its side, then you better don't bother. Like nowadays, the internet is optimized in order to create defendable modes. And in the case of Skroutz food and eFood obviously is a very well managed company with lots of know-how in the sector, and they had a good defendable mode, and our value proposition was simply not 10 times better. And I think this goes for the overall product development approach. Just as important as the product development steps and everything you do, it's just as important to pick the battles you actually can and should win. Okay, so we'll cover, you'll see like some slides now where we cover like product market fit, MVP, scale, and everything beyond it. So these are just some notes. I'll start rubbling and bubbling a bit about it, and please feel free to continue with the questions. Like they're really spot on, and feel free to ask anything. Like I'm not. I think I have an NDA on specific issues, which I can refer to if needed. But yeah. So
everything you say will stay within the product community, so don't worry.
And recorded and gets very so okay. In terms of product market fit, this is something which I especially due to structured ventures I'm living right now very, very strongly, because in Skroutz you have a certain size which dictates product market fit. So it's hard, when in a big company, when you create internally a new product, it's hard to gauge if it's a good fit, especially if it's on the same stakeholders as the core product, because they can't like separate the new with the existing value proposition, and they treat it as part of it. So feedback you get is a bit skewed. On structured ventures on the other side, this is very, you create a new product for a new value proposition for a new specific customer segment. And I think one of the most important parts there is like a product market fitness function. So like, how can I, run this innovate, test, recalibrate loop you need, and what's the fitness function which allows me to adjust like the initial output and feed it back into the system just to iterate as early on as possible. And one thing we found out with the structured team was one clear indicator of a good product market fit is passion. Like you can see it, for example, in the initial early adopters, if they're actually passionate about your product. Okay, obviously nobody will like turn you down and say this is an awful product or something else. Most of the people will try to be polite, but passion you can really understand. You can really see, and obviously this is something you can actually measure. At Skroutz, at the very early stages, like 2004, we were ourselves our own like early adopters. It was 2004. In order to buy a graphics card, you would actually have to visit like 100 different websites. So everything we built there was actually, for us, like we in 2005, 2006, 2007, people were building handmade PCs. We're not always buying like MacBooks. So you need to like have a shopping list and compare prices. There were like huge price differences because it wasn't easy to compare prices. And, like we actually built like 60, 70% of the Skroutz code base just to cover our own needs. Like, okay, I'll need to buy a PC, I'll need to buy this and everything else. So we had early adopters even for Skroutz, but for the startup product development, I think you need to focus very much on these early adopters. The passion, as I said, is something you need to see, you will understand, you will be able to measure, because a passionate user is a passionate user of your product. So you need them not only to be kind on a Zoom call or everything else, they need to, on a daily basis, use your product. They need to bug you if the product is down because you're doing like a maintenance or you have a bug or anything else. And as I said early in the beginning, I'm a bit of hunch-based in terms of product development. The same passion should radiate from you. Like, as I said, in 2016, I didn't feel like I can contribute to the core value proposition of a price comparison engine. Okay, maybe I moved on with my life. Maybe I wasn't like eager to do the price comparison part of each of my shopping needs. But I felt like there's nothing, is driving me here. So I was moving on to the marketplace because there where I felt like there is passion. So in terms of product market fit, the one thing I can just underline is find those early adopters. In a case like, for example, Orpheum, I know you have like a very specific users and who is using your system, but you need to have like 2 or 3 of them very close by, to run the early prototypes by them, to get the feedback, to build the product especially for them, in order to have like the specific users. If the product you're building is applicable to yourself and you're not passionate about your product, how can you possibly think you can sell it or upsell it to someone else? Like, you're God mode for your own product. Like, why would anybody else use it? You can do anything on your own product, change the code base. So a passion as a product market fit driver. No questions, so I keep on moving.
I have one question. So,
sure.
What's the difference between a more mature, let's say, startup, you could say a scale-up company, compared to an early stage startup on approaching, let's say, early adopters? For a mature company, it's quite easy because they already have a customer base. But what happens when you're starting from scratch? Any ideas there?
Yeah, that's this is like you'll need to go like for the venture studios. We usually have these cycles like ideation, validation, product solution, product market fit, MVP, and everything else. So you need to go to the ideation validation part, and obviously, if you do the lean canvas, everything else, you initially build like the target audience, and then inside of the target audience you get the early adopters, which is a niche part of the target audience. And it's part of finding the product. If you find the product, or if you have something about the product, like the early adopters are very obvious, and they are usually very passionate about their craft, and you're trying to upsell them a specific value, so you can easily find them. The problem I've seen for a startup is how to get early adopters to be vocal about what you're building and to be in the loop about this. And the only way is treating them like you're building the product especially for them. Like, I'm not building like a product for Sakis who does Zoom calls. I'm building Sakis a better video conferencing platform, and it's just for you, mate. You know, just tell me what you need. Some of the things you'll tell me I'll fix because I'll think, you know, they're applicable to a broader audience. But I need to make you feel like you're king of the product, so that I get like 110% of your feedback.
It's all about the user experience at the end of the day.
It's like, I was kind of, we at Skroutz were always around, centered around the user. And as I've seen, you know, I'm like mingling with maybe like bigger players on the startup scene level and fund level, like they also put like, number one is like customer and user experience. It's like this drives everything, like all decisions. So in terms of the MVP, or you know, the minimum viable product, or as I want to define it, is the main value proposition, because that's like, you know, for me, a better mental model in order to nail it down. Like, you know, the minimum viable product, it's like, when you think, you know, this is like this picture, the minimum viable product of a car is a tire. But the main value proposition of a car is a bicycle. Like, you know, you want, the value proposition is that I'm transporting you quickly and efficiently from A to B. It's not like, you know, this is like the building block of something else, or, you know, it's not happening through abstraction, pure abstraction. It's happening through smart abstraction. Okay, there's another question here. Let me go maybe through the slide, and I'll cover this in parallel then. So to define this main value proposition, you need, you know, to think about your early adopters, their biggest problem, and focus relentlessly on this. Like, it's very easy to build up everything, you know, surrounding this, but not the actual point. And I can tell you about you know, a startup, a venture we're building. It's like a Calendly meets Stripe meets video chat conference. It's like a tool for workout for specific, you know, trainers. And, you know, we try to build up the MVP, and we build a Calendly clone, and we did the Stripe marketplace integration, and we did a chat platform with Monage and everything else. And I'll write this all down on a blog post. And like, it took us six months, you know, to do the MVP. We're a small team yet. And then, you know, we realized we have covered lots of ground, but not the actual problem. The actual problem was, I can't have a good workout experience through a standard chat app. It's like, it's not working. You know, I'm not seeing him exactly. I can't show him. I need to change constantly viewports. He's seeing me through my, so instead of focusing on just building the video platform, we kind of made the mistake that we built like everything surrounding it, which wasn't adding to the single problem. And this is, you see, I've done this like for 16 years now. This is a very easy trap to fall into, like building like all the neat little stuff around the design and everything else, and not relentlessly focusing on the top problem, on the one thing the early adopter will worship you for. You know, it's like always ask yourself, if I don't, or if I you know, break this, will he call me like in the middle of the night and beg me to fix this? If not, then I'm working on the wrong stuff. Okay, so tools, I'll just go through the question. So Vicky's asking, do you see an opportunity in the reviews on Skroutz? There's a wealth of data in there, ranging from customer satisfaction, product absorption, rejection, up to service fails. Have you ever brainstormed or acted on this? You know, customer reviews, user-generated content is a huge thing for marketplaces. it's actually that's creating your moat. Everything else can be copied, but user-generated content cannot be copied, cannot be bought. Each time we kind of associated user reviews with some kind of reward, we only got crap, and afterwards deleted like 15,000 reviews. So sorry. So yes, there is a wealth of data in there. And let me quickly just, sorry, sorry for this, but we don't, yes.
But I really like the analogy that you mentioned about the bicycle, about being the main value proposition instead of, just a wheel.
Yes.
But in some cases, it's quite difficult when you're dealing with unknown, let's say, territory, and it's a new business model that you're trying out, and it's a new customer segment that you're trying out. You're not really sure what's the equivalent of a wheel or a bicycle in your case.
But you need to find this like the single point where I think, think about it, like, what can I do for him? What's this biggest point? What if a problem? What if I solve it for him? Like, and then relentlessly just focus on this. Like everything else is like, can be built later on around this, but this is the one problem this gives you focus. This gives you a single point of attack. This gives you a very good feedback loop because you're solving a very passionate problem for the single user. So, that there is no kind of easy way to do or algorithmic way, to drill down on the specific problem, but on the selection of the MVP. But it's like just a guidance, like follow the passion of your early adopters and the problems of your early adopters. Just to close on the question regarding user reviews, yes,
exactly.
Reviews are a huge topic inside of Skroutz. We had do sentiment analysis on them. We try to do them structured, non-structured. We try different approaches there. We use them, like Skroutz is built around a set of signals, like even ranking is taking into account what users think about it, reviews and everything else. Obviously, it's also a very hard source to moderate, a very hard source to get it right, and to avoid, that people taint the data set. So, like, it comes with lots of baggage. And the other thing that's like a bit problematic in Greece is there aren't many like libraries, tools available that make it easy, for Greek to be successfully, analyzed, parsed, and everything else. Like, if we were on English-speaking side, I think we could do more. But I know there is a team dedicated just to this, and usually they do the big part of moderation, but they also do the brainstorming around this. Helen, thanks for sharing. Can you share an example when focusing on early adopters with the MVP or even later that didn't work at scale and led to a major focus shift? Did it change anything at Skroutz product development approach? An example when focusing on early adopters with the MVP that didn't work at scale and led to a major, from the initial products. We had a very strong relation with Insomnia, which is a forum. And this was actually kind of also the inspiration in terms of adding at some point classifieds to Skroutz. So we knew this is something, and at this point, once again, we were also active in the classified as a personal in the classified scheme and everything else. But the problem is you can't apply everything to everything. On Skroutz, it was the wrong audience. It's the closest I'll come to in terms of early adopters, MVP, and the major shift was obviously we asked it, but it was major development and also introducing something on a site with massive traffic and then like killing it, it's not the best thing you can do in terms of user perception, quality perception, everything else. I think Google is the outlier. They're building stuff just to kill it later. But for all other companies, it's not something you can easily do. So, Yanni, it's the only thing I can come up with. And then product for entrepreneurs versus product for product managers. Is it a matter of different product lifecycle, of mindset, or of business understanding? When PMs grow and become product leaders, can they act like entrepreneurs? So from the last question first, yes, I think like this for me is the way a large company should scale. Like, you know, you should, in order to innovate, for example, the venture studio model right now, okay, it's actually used outside of Greece, outside of Europe, as an incubator / innovator tool for large companies. Like what they're doing, like they're taking venture studios and ask them, can you innovate for me internally? Because I lost this ability. Okay, so I'm trapped right now in specific like cycles of iterations and just, you know, doing the local optimum. Can you innovate for me with an internal team? And then can we spin it out as a separate product? So if you look at this is like kind of the struggle of the beast in order to, you know, to bring this in-house. For me, like this is the real goal of a company, like being able, you know, to spin out and grow with specific nodes of innovation, which once again, you know, can reap the benefits of being part of a bigger organization, of being part of a longer journey and having the experience, but then quickly iterate on the cycles needed to do rapid product development. So for me, it's like, you know, the better approach for company growth in the long term. In terms of product for entrepreneurs, product for product manager, it's not the different product life cycle. You start at a different point of the product life cycle. So if you're doing like product for product managers, you are part of a company. So the product solution fit problem is not like a big problem for you. You know, this is a problem we're working on, and this we are supposed to work on this problem. So you need to find the product market fit. Like, is this something worth our time? But we're doing e-commerce, okay? We're doing like lead generation for e-commerce. So the first part of the overall product pipeline is kind of solved when you're doing product development as a product manager. And yes.
So what
Yes,
would you say is the biggest difference between, you know, entrepreneurs and PMs?
In my case, they were like, sorry?
What do they lack? Is it a set of skills that they're missing out? Is it
it's like,
mindset,
you know,
as Joseph is asking?
You know, first, entrepreneur is in survival mode. So, you know, it's a different kind of beast, okay, which is good, positive, negative. Second, as a product manager, you usually have like a full tool set. You have engineers, you have designers, you have like data analysts, whatever you need in order to build. As an entrepreneur, you might be an engineer, so you can build an engineering prototype. You might be someone from sales, so when you do MVP, validation, everything else, you need to do it, you know, on a Flintstoning kind of way, like fake your way into the product. So it's like tools available, mindset, and what if I fail as an entrepreneur? What if I fail as a product manager? You know, as a product manager, usually people don't get hired for a bad effort, but as an entrepreneur, you can be in serious trouble if you, for example, you know, spend your own money, or yes, you're a bit more risky.
Yes, we've been there, done that.
Okay. So I'll move along here on the scale side. There is, sorry. See, on the scale side, it was in 2015. There was an investor who came to our offices, and he asked us this question, which stuck with me for a long time. It's like, when we talked about, he obviously wanted to invest it into us, but we were like very restrictive about, okay, we don't want anybody else to add to our product development life cycle. We think we got it nailed. We know everything and everything else. So the question was, rich or king? And this is a question I'm doing for all startups I'm working for, because there are two types of business development. You can do startup business development, where you head for a massive growth because you need, in a specific cycle, reach specific growth targets. That's the way it works. And then you can do like business development, like our ancestors did, like hit early profitability and kind of take it from there. And and the first part, you have a good shot at being rich. And the second part, you have a better shot at being maybe wealthy, but also king of the hill, like doing whatever you like during your day and not having to, answer to investors. And the question here is, when you scale up, is, which do you want to be, rich or king? And if we move this into like, product space, growth or profit. I talk to lots of investors, and some of them think that you don't have to pick either. You can have both. That's the case in some specific segments. Especially, you'll see that as a company gets bigger, you can actually have both, because you can do growth through acquisitions, which, add to the bottom line. It's easy. And, it's kind of a cheat code in terms of scaling up. But if you want to do growth through product development, usually, for marketplace, for example, there was this dichotomy. All marketplaces have this like balance between supply and demand. So in order to be profitable, we needed a higher take rate. If we have a higher take rate, people don't want to join, shops don't want to join. So you sacrifice growth for profit, profits for growth. And this is also always like the chicken egg problem, the cold start problem of the marketplaces per se. We at Skroutz, and this is also my philosophy, I'm more of a king guy. Okay, suits me better. What we always kind of had was like this marathon mentality. I was born in Germany. In Germany, usually you walk around and you see like companies which have survived 200 years. Whereas, nowadays you don't see lots of companies, especially in our segment, tech segment, who survive lots of years. Usually they get acquired. Usually at some point they scale down, or they don't continue to grow. So for me, it was always kind of in terms of scale, a marathon mentality, like have a good growth profile over the years. Skroutz is growing even nowadays, like 30% year over year, but it's doing, in a very profitable way, in a very smooth way for the people involved also. And I talked about it. I mentioned here the dreaded backlog, which is something also, when we talk about scale, we talk usually about numbers like revenue, bottom line, user growth. But what about cultural scale? Okay, what about how do people feel of your company as you scale up? Do they lose traction? Do you hear them? Do you have like time for this dreaded backlog? Like we had engineers where we said, okay, we'll do a raise for your salary, and they said, okay, I don't need more money. I need more time to spend on the things I think are worthy spending on. And you always need to keep this in mind, like scale is not something only on a material level, especially for a company who wants to be like relative, known and grow over the years. So the backlog is like, it's for me also on structured ventures, I have like this specific, like after we close a venture, like we need 3 to 6 times just working on the backlog, just people need to feel good about they have completed the work the way they wanted it to do. So this is in terms of scale. And then obviously, like, the biggest drivers for scale in our case were always reinventing yourself, like not staying confident that we are a price comparison engine, moving into marketplace, moving into other segments, moving into last mile delivery operations and everything else. And to make the biggest gains by working on the stuff you're not good at. So lean into the pain. For us, it was operations. Like for 2000, from 2004 to 2018, operations was a dreaded word inside of Scrooge. Like, we don't want operation. We don't want lots of salespeople. We don't do marketing. We only create scalable experiences, lots of engineering. And, the switch was, can we do operations in a scalable way? Can we do operations supported by engineering? So this was also like the biggest gain in terms of experience, in terms of company value, in terms of everything associated with it. Final slides, guys and girls. Maturity. Any questions? Please. I have this tendency to keep talking a lot, so please feel free to. And I don't see how many of the attendees are still here. Maybe everyone has left, and I'm talking to myself.
Yes, I think what you're talking about is pretty interesting. So this is why they're staying. I wanted to go back to the slide where you mentioned about the marathon mentality. So when a company is scaling and they're trying, to document all the processes in order to scale easier as they grow along, do you think it becomes more difficult to have that flexibility of a small, let's say, group of a startup? Can you innovate as fast as one would like?
This is my personal experience, obviously, and it's not like this is like the best way to go. It worked for me, and at a certain point of the Scrooge life cycle, okay, Scrooge is over this life cycle right now. But when we reached you have this Dunbar number at 140, and then you need to scale up, communications internally, tools, goals, frameworks, and everything else. We introduced OKRs at some point, and I really tried to, go along with this. But at some point, when you need to have like all this overhead of, it's like killing, at least for me, and it's totally personal. It's like passion is a big part of it, and when you start your day with passion, okay, I need to build this is going to be awesome, this is going to be the next big thing and everything else, and then you have like OKR meeting at 10 o'clock, everybody needs to merge the Excels and everything. Was killing it for me, obviously. Sorry?
Innovation killers.
It's not like it's innovation killers. This is like, I think this is so important at a certain point, it's like, for me, it wasn't like helping me to innovate. I don't think, like, there are people who can innovate inside of this. And obviously, Scrooge is innovating crazily inside of this framework, and obviously driven also by co-founders. But, you need to see what ticks for you. For me, Vasilis, this, was something where I need to kind of manage the level of exposure, the outside exposure we need to have as a startup, and this is also for some startups. They need to be aware if they do like this is the same is if you have investors. Like if you have too many investors, wrong investors, you need to take into account that this will drain you a bit in terms of like talking to them, taking feedback and everything else. The same is inside of a company. If you're trying to innovate, you can't have like external touch points all the time with all the others inside of the company. You need to be in your silo a bit, obviously you need strategic, you need to put everything into a certain bucket, but there is a thin line between, being over communicative inside of the company, and some companies need that, and actually being able to innovate.
We've got some questions here.
Yes, I'll go with the smaller one. No, I go with the first one first. So in terms of timestamps, what about UX research? I'm doing research for a big e-commerce company. There's a huge interest in this field abroad. What level of importance does it have in Skroutz? So UX, this was, the big thing. Like UX was very, very important, like in terms of research, but also in terms of philosophy. I think UX in product is a value proposition. In order to have a coherent value proposition, it's not necessarily to have the correct philosophy, but you have to have a philosophy. So who is my user? What am I trying to achieve? How am I going to help him achieve it? What are the non-negotiables of my user interface, of my user approach, of how I see the user? Okay, and I have this hierarchy matrix inside of me in terms of product coding also. It's like, first thing you need to do is remove code. Okay, then you need restructure code. Then you need to document code. And if you have done all of this and have nothing more, then you can add code. Okay, at least for a product who's reached a certain maturity, it's much more important to a designer said it, when you walk out of your house, take a look at the mirror and take one thing off. So this is also always the question I'm asking. If someone, comes up with a new feature, okay, what have you removed from your product in the last 3 to 6 months? Okay, what's your learning about it? Like, how do you keep your UX scope assembled and concentrated on a specific philosophy and everything else? So UX very huge. Hope this answers it. If you at any time, UX is a passion topic of mine. Anytime, reach out. Any company that you study, follow on how to build products, obviously Orpheum, big. Sorry, stupid joke. No. I have like a good dialogue with some of the people in Orpheum, and that it's surprising how many companies have reached a certain scale and are doing so many good things in Greece and are not that well known. Okay, so this is one thing. In terms of obviously, I think Apple has kind of a good thumb on the issue of product development and everything else. But I'm not really, into these over-communicative companies like 37 Signals and everything else. Like, I'm not like in this camp. And as I said, more of product development for me was something like how we grew up with it and how we developed it ourselves. So on the maturity topics, okay. One thing that it's a pure hindsight lesson for me was how do you expand your offering? And this is something, Skroutz is working right now on, and this is an easy trick. Like, Skroutz is doing e-commerce. So when you think about it, we were like between the buyer and the seller. Okay, this was obviously the cash transaction between them. And actually, we were only part of the interest part. Like, I'm interested in your product. And then we followed the money and said, okay, let's add the transaction part into our covering experience. Okay. And then we followed the money and said, okay, let's add the last mile delivery, because this is a huge part of the overall transaction and commission exchanged in between. And then we followed the money and said, okay, you're paying with card, let's do, payments, because this is a part of the overall experience. So you usually sit somewhere in a value exchange cycle. And the easy thing to do is like follow the money, like, and this is like depth first search versus breadth first search, like going deep into what you're already doing versus, as I said in the early slides, trying to find new markets and said like parallel revenue streams. Like try to find your revenue stream and how it expands in depth, and then you'll have like an easier part and path in order to cover it. In terms of M&A, also lesson learned, which we're living like right now, is there is something which is called VCP. I learned it, the acronyms like a year ago or two. It's a value creation plan, which is very interesting. If you see how like big players approach M&A, they acquire a target and then they hire like an external Bain, McKinsey, whatever you like, and they let them create a value creation plan. Because if you had an outside source, it's very easy for them to say, dude, you're underpricing your target. And this is sometimes very obvious, but sometimes it's very eye-opening because they're looking at it in a sterile way and are not burdened with whatever you have experienced over the years, and it's like pressuring down on product development. So this is another kind of eye-opener for me. And the last thing, obviously, exit scenarios and everything else. I've been fortunate that the first company I built had a successful exit at some point, but it's a cliche, but the journey is the destination. Like for everyone working at a company right now, this is it. Like it's not like passing the line. If you see like entrepreneurs, product managers, they're not really retiring. Like nobody's like living then on a yacht somewhere in the Caribbean and just slurping pina coladas. It's like usually the next thing. And so enjoy it. The journey is the destination. So product development is we are a very blessed generation to be able to create a product, a company from our sofa with a laptop. So
just before we close, can you tell more about the value creation plan? I was really,
yes,
interested, curious, I would say, to know what exactly,
does it cover?
Brought from the outside can add so much value to an existing mature business.
Obviously, on a larger scale, a value creation plan is done from counseling from counselors, from big companies who have like a multi-national experience and can also drive like, you are pricing it like 5%, and in Germany they're pricing it 50%. So this is your upside potential regarding to everything else. Then there is like this untainted view on your operations internally and how they are affecting like specific parts. And it's not necessarily, it's I said, it's kind of not burdened by your past. And obviously for most of the stuff we saw on the value creation plan, there was a good explanation why we didn't do it. But if you just see like the margin, you say, oh my God, I was losing out on so much, and maybe I don't need to go all the way, but there is a good margin on the different topics they cover. And it's not only, on a pure business side, it's also on how can we create value for the end user outside of all of this?
Really interesting. I think if we don't have any other questions from the audience.
Yes. Now or I'll marry the bride.
So would you like to tell us more about structured ventures just before we close? So if, for example, someone has an idea, how can they reach out to you? How does it work?
It's like what's what's Greece like? If you covered Greece over the last year, I think Sakis, you had through the past experience also a good coverage of Greece. Greece like skipped the early stage investing part. Like we moved to larger funds, whereas VCs, whereas we didn't have like the initial VCs. So, you know, and Greece is by default like a country with lots of entrepreneurs, maybe, you know, not necessarily like these high-tech entrepreneurs, but the spirit of the Greek is to be independent, to have a company and everything else. So the venture studio model is something like people like me who have a specific background and specific knowledge on a specific sector with a group of people who can build stuff, you know, to be paired with someone who is passionate, a founder who is passionate about a specific market. And if we click, if both of us are interested in it, then we build together this venture. And usually, you know, it takes us like 6 to 9 months. We build the initial prototype and everything else. And after the 6 months, this venture graduates from the venture studio. It gets like initial round of funding. We set a target, and like 12 to 16 months down the road, you know, we will see where we end. Obviously, the venture studio and myself are shadowing this venture, and you know, hope that everything went well and help them along the way. This is the initial venture studio model, very much used in the United States. I think adaptations of these are necessary because obviously Greece is a less mature market.
Different market, different culture.
Yes. And for structured ventures, you know, we did venture one, we're adjusting, we're tuning, we're fine tuning, we're expanding, and we'll see how it works out. But the journey is nice.
Well, I hope the best because it's really interesting, and obviously an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, has always a lot of insights to share with new ventures and new startups. One last question I would like to ask just before we close. It's a personal favorite. So if someone wanted to start, you know, his career as a PM or an entrepreneur, which books would you suggest to read?
Always thinking fast, thinking slow, Kahneman, in terms of empathy, understanding how the human mind works, you know, and you know, it's like cornerstone. The lean startup, in order to familiarize themselves, like also running lean, you know, everything included in this section, which I think, you know, yes, I'm into the startup movement more than into the scale-up movement. So they are a bit biased on this side.
Said it all. I love all these books. So I think it's about time to close the session. I would like to thank you once more for your time. I really appreciate that you took the time to share all the lessons learned, and
thanks for having me.
Help the community understand the difficulties and the challenges of you know, starting anything. It could be, you know, a new startup, it could be a new product, a new feature, whatever. I might grab another opportunity to invite you in a future event where we could have like a roundtable discussion with other product leaders and have a little bit of a debate.
My pleasure.
So thanks. I would like to thank also our sponsor Orpheum, our supporters, Product Community Greece, and obviously the people that joined the discussion with their questions.
Thanks, everyone.
And
feel free to reach out. Anyone attending, questions or whatever, just a quick chat.
Definitely. I'm pretty sure you're open to connect with anyone, either on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I think that's about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sakis.
Have a good night.
Have a good night. Bye, everyone.